Welcome back to another episode of Cooking with Tovia. We're going to be making king's cake. All the ingredients are in the description field of this video. This recipe is adapted from the Dixie Crystals website. However, I made a few adjustments to it to make the recipe easier to make, and also adjusted the yeast because the yeast had far too much. I felt like it was just too much yeast. And for the salt, I adjusted the salt. So I'm also doing half a recipe. So if you want to do the full recipe, it's listed on the website. But I'm gonna put the recipe that I'm doing in the description box. So I have 2¼ cups of all-purpose flour. When I measured the flour, I made sure I fluffed the flour really well, that it's not packed, and then I just measure lightly. So to the flour, I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. If you're gonna use fine sea salt or any fine grain of salt, then you need to use a half of teaspoon of salt. To the flour, we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of sugar, or you can use 1 tablespoon of honey. And the sugar that I'm using is Dixie Crystals. Thank you so much, guys. I love this company. Dixie Crystals and Pure Sugar, they're the same company. That's what I'm using. I'm also going to add 1 package of instant yeast. If you're going to use active dry yeast, then you need to proof the yeast first. With instant yeast, you can just instantly use it. You can just add it to your flours and it will work. You don't have to, there's no pre-proofing required. This is also known as bread machine yeast. If you use this with your bread machines, you would use instant yeast. That way it skips the proofing stage. Let's take my fork, put the dry ingredients together. So I have 1 egg that's at room temperature, and I have here a half a cup plus 2 tablespoons of milk, and the milk that I'm using is lactose free, and it's 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter. I melted the 2 together and let it cool to about 110 degrees. So I'm going to crack in a room temperature egg, and we're going to mix all those ingredients together. I just want to beat the egg up a bit. And also I'm going to add a tablespoon of pure vanilla extract. This is Bobba Gran's Pure Mexican Vanilla. It's alcohol free. You'll find out about them in the description box as well. So I'm just add that vanilla to our egg milk butter mixture. So I'm going to just pour this into the bottom of my mixer. I'm using the Geek Chef mixer. It's 4.5 quarts mixer, really great mixer. And I have it fixed with the dough hook. I'm gonna just let this go. We're gonna let this knead on low speed. So I have this on number 1 on my mixer, and we're gonna let this mix together for 15 minutes. I'm gonna stop the machine and scrape to assist it along the way. So we'll be back after 15 minutes. So it's been a couple of minutes, and if you find that your dough is looking super wet like this, then simply shake in a couple more tablespoons of flour. It's better to begin with not enough flour than to begin with too much flour, because you can always add more flour, but you can't take it out. So I'm gonna just let this mix for a minute or so, and then I'm gonna come back and let's see what the dough looks like. So the dough, I added 2 more tablespoons, so I added an extra 1/4 cup. So that's 2.5 cups of flour total that I've used so far. And it's starting to cool away from the sides of the bowl, and it doesn't look too sticky, so I think we're good here. So I'm gonna let this go for about another 10 minutes, and we'll be back. So the dough's been kneading for 15 minutes, and the dough's slightly sticky, but it doesn't quite stick to my hands. And that's what we're after. Take the dough over, just gonna get the dough a nice flip it once. And During your mixing process, when you go to stop the machine to scrape the bowl, make sure you stop, scrape the bottom center of your bowl, because all your flour has a tendency to sink and sit right there and not get combined with your ingredients. So, you see the dough is nice. So I'm going to just cover this with a sheet of plastic wrap. And after I cover it with plastic wrap, I'll just let this sit for about an hour in a nice warm place. So about an hour or until it's doubled in size. So we're gonna make the filling. So you need some brown sugar. So I used same sugar, Dixie Crystals, but I made my own brown sugar, as you can see here. So if you don't have brown sugar on hand, all you do is take a substantial amount of granulated sugar and pour in some molasses, a few tablespoons of molasses, and just mix it together. You need it to be darker, so slowly add more molasses. If it gets too dark or too molassy, if there's such a word, just add more white sugar to it to bring it back to the right consistency. And you can use this for your baking and all of that. So I have 4 tablespoons or a quarter cup of butter that is at room temperature. It's pretty soft. I'm just gonna pack my cup, half a cup of brown sugar here. So I'm gonna add my homemade brown sugar to my butter. I'm gonna add a tablespoon of cinnamon. I love cinnamon. Tablespoon cinnamon. And you're just gonna mix these ingredients together. Just to sort of cream them together. And see, that's what we're after. Since it's nice and creamed together. So set that aside. So my dough's risen for an hour. Just put a little bit of flour down. So I have a piece of parchment paper here. You can use a baking mat. But it'll make it so much easier to roll your dough and move your dough, because this dough is very soft and it will rip, it will fall apart. Believe me, it will happen if you don't do it this way, or if you are not good at maneuvering it. But if you have it the right consistency, it's very soft, and you will need to have it on something. So I'm going to begin to press the dough from the center and then outward. I'm going to make a 10-inch by 20-inch rectangle roughly. And make sure you're pressing from, the middle and outward, so that way your dough doesn't get too thin. Because if your dough gets too thin and you go to bake this, it's going to fall apart. It'll still be good, but it just won't be so pretty. Put a little flour on top. And I'm just going to take my rolling pin and we're just going to roll it to about 20 inches. Got a little bit of cinnamon on the dough from my hands, but that's okay. And when I press with my rolling pin, I'm not putting all my weight in. I'm just sort of pressing lightly, but then easing the pressure and just letting it roll naturally. Okay, so I don't want the dough to be too thin. This is about a little thicker than 1/4 inch thick. But I'm gonna let this rest for about 5 minutes sitting here on the surface, and we'll be back. So I let the dough rest for a few minutes, and it's good to let the dough rest. It just makes it easier to work with, so it doesn't snap back on you. So I'm just gonna take my cinnamon butter mixture and I'm just gonna spread it all over the dough, but I'm gonna stay within 1/2 inch from the edge. Now some people put nuts inside. I am not gonna do that. Stay away from that. So I'm gonna use my paper to sort of help roll the dough up. I'm just gonna help start with my hand, but then we're just gonna use the paper to roll it. Okay, so I got that all rolled up. So I want to pinch the edges, the seam together. The dough's pretty soft too, really nice and soft. So what I'm going to do now is move this into my pan. Then we're going to take these ends here and just pinch it together. And see, when this rises, this will be somewhat invisible, but it'll get covered up with the frosting. But we just want to try to pinch that part together as good as we can. Just go take a tip of a knife and just sort of make little slits on top. This is to keep it from, if it swells up too much and a lot of air gets in, it can explode in your oven. So this is to let the steam out. So I'm going to take my scissors and just trim off this excess paper. Yeah, it's foggy man, but that's my springform pan on. And I'm going to let this rise. I'm going to cover it with a cloth and then we'll be back. Okay, so this is going to go in my preheated 350-degree Fahrenheit. I have my fan on, and this is going to bake for about 35 minutes to 45 minutes or until it's golden brown on top. Here is the king's cake. I'm going to go ahead and let it cool. So my king cake has completely cooled. I have here, I'm using Dixie Crystal powdered sugar. Imperial Sugar, same company. Thanks a lot for the sugar, guys. I really appreciate it. So in my bowl, I have about 1 cup of powdered sugar. We're gonna put in a couple of teaspoons of that Bobba Gran's Mexican vanilla. Now you can use either a couple teaspoons of melted butter. I'm just gonna use a couple of teaspoons of, I'm just gonna add a teaspoon of milk right now. I'm using lactose-free milk. We're gonna just mix those ingredients together. If it's too thick, just add in half a teaspoon extra milk so it's the right consistency. And I'm just gonna pour just a little bit. So I have some sanding sugar, and I'm just gonna go across with gold, purple, and green. So a little bit of gold here. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut into this cake. Just work quickly. So let you guys see the inside of it. Beautiful. It's beautiful, beautiful, soft. So good and buttery and soft. It just melts in your mouth. It's absolutely delicious. Add this video to your playlist and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. And please remember to live and be well.